Good morning and welcome to day 2 of Untapped Talent Summit 2.0, ready to work. Please silence your devices and prepare for what promises to be an engaging day. On the screens throughout the day, you will see QR codes. Be sure to scan and follow the instructions to read bios and register for future work. QR codes may also be found in your Untapped program on page 9. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Lisa S. Vosper, Senior Associate Commissioner for Workforce Education, Collaboration, and Engagement at Louisiana Board of Regents, and our host for today.
Every month, 900 to 1,250 people are released from Louisiana's jails and prisons. Not once a year, not quarterly, every single month. And many return to communities having faced limited access, limited options, and limited preparation, both behind the wall and on the outside. And there is no clear on-ramp to meaningful work yet. Welcome to the Untapped Talent Solutions War Room. This is not just a conference, guys. This is not a coffee chat, even though we do have coffee and we will chat. Let me say that. It's a blueprint lab for bold solutions, and you're going to be a part of it. This year's theme is Ready to Work. It is a double entendre intentionally. It is a double charge. We're not talking about just today's agenda with that topic, bless you. We're talking about a mandate for systems, for sectors, for leaders across the state to be ready to work on policies that restore dignity, ready to work on partnerships that build capacity, and to ensure Louisiana's emerging workforce, the system impacted, are truly ready to work when they return home. But here's the real question. How does our state's largest hidden labor force, that 900 to 1,250, get the required work experience, earn industry-based credentials, earn advanced degrees, access technology, access tools that keep pace with the jobs of tomorrow? No, wait. The jobs of today, the jobs of right now. How do they do that? In systems that perhaps were never really built for re-entry in mind, but could be rebuilt for a future where their future is centered. That's why we're here. We are here not for silent observation. Commissioner Reed, who you'll meet in a little bit, her first week on the job as Louisiana's 8th, I think, Commissioner of Higher Education, she made a statement that has stuck with me ever since she said it. We were telling her all the things that were happening. Some of them, Senator, were in the Pointy building. And so we were talking about all of the things, and Commissioner Reed hit the table, and if she points her finger, get ready. But she pointed her finger. She said, what we will not do is sit around and be admirers of problems. I was like, check. We own it. So we cannot sit around and be admirers of problems. Silent observation is not the order of the day. We are here for system shifting, for co-creation, for new alliances, new language, new level action, and you were actually invited here because you're not afraid of the hard truths. You bring strategy, you bring wisdom, expertise, boldness, but also you bring compassion. And Louisiana needs all of it because untapped talent is not really, I don't want us to think about us doing this work as being charity. It's actually our competitive advantage. If we do this right, guys, this is our competitive advantage. So before we dig in, let me thank some incredible partners who made this summit possible. Our friends from Ascendium Education Group could not be with us today, but they're our title sponsor and the reason that we're able to do this on this scale. Our platinum partners and advisors with Jobs for the Future. Where are my JFF family? They're in the house. Thank you guys so much. Our SHIO partners, where's Dr. John and Sakshi and Dr. Rachel? Thank you guys so much for being here. Operation Restoration and Tulane University. Shout out to Sarita, Dr. Heidi, Dr. Marco. They hosted our tour yesterday to LCIW, and our bronze sponsors, Loyola and JSRI. They hosted our Rayborn trip. Anybody went to Rayborn or to LCIW? Thank you guys for doing that. And then I want to thank Dr. Stephanie Gasco. Is Stephanie, I had never seen her. Hey, there you are. So Dr. Gasco, your support has been at the titanium level. I didn't have one of those on the slide, but I want to just say thank you. And to all of our untapped faculty, contributors, organizational partners, thank you for helping bring this to life. There are some legislators in the room. Where's Barbara Freiberg? Where is she? Oh, there you go. Hey, thank you. So I want to say to our legislators that really lean into this work, she is a fierce advocate for education at all levels. Thank you so much for being here. And I do want to take a point of personal privilege to thank my twin sister. I have an identical twin sister. You all may have seen her around and thought it was me. It's not me. We trick people all the time, but she also happens to be the secretary of Louisiana Works, and she's here today, Susie Shawin. Yay! So glad to see you. Thank you for being here. Amazing partners we have. Now, let's get ready to work, and we're not talking about just theory. We're talking about action. We're going to do it. We're going to shift policy. We're going to shift perspectives and perceptions, and let's prove that Louisiana's untapped talent truly is ready to work. So I want to invite, to bring greetings, it's now my pleasure to welcome the chair of the Louisiana Board of Regents, Miss Misty Cardell.
First, everybody give a warm round of applause to Miss Lisa Vosper and all the work that she's done. She's even coordinated her outfit in Regents colors. I mean, the woman does not miss a detail. And thanks also to Senator Edmonds for being here as well, and Rep. Freiberg. You guys are doing some great work, and we do appreciate everything that you're doing and your dedication to this. Good morning and welcome to the Untapped Summit 2.0. On behalf of the Louisiana Board of Regents, we welcome all of you that have joined us today to focus on solutions that will ensure that more of our citizens, including the justice-involved citizens, have a path to employment and self-sufficiency. I have to echo Dr. Vosper's her numbers. 900 to 1,250 a month are released. So when we were at Rayburn yesterday, one of the directors had mentioned, he said, you know, these guys are going to get out and they're going to go into the workforce. Would you rather have somebody that's educated living next door to you or someone that's not? And it really did resonate. These are things that this is an opportunity, and it's something that we can wrap our arms around. And kudos to everybody that's in this room that's looking for the solutions, because we have the opportunity to do some great work here. As chair of the Board of Regents, I'm proud of our steadfast commitment to strengthening the education to employment pipeline in our state. I love working with Susie and Kim. We have had some great meetings, some great meeting of the minds, and that's truly what our focus is. How do we get people an education, and then out into the workforce, and preferably, my preference is to keep them here in this state if we can. Our educational attainment North Star is that 60% of all working-age citizens in our state have an educational passport for a productive future. That may be a degree, a certificate, or an industry-based credential. As you engage in today's sessions, remember that we are not just seeking solutions for today, we're investing in Louisiana's future. So thank you to those partners across the state, agencies, colleges, industry, and all who have already joined with us to help this work that we're doing to make Louisiana better. Again, thank you, and we look forward to the day.
Thank you, Regent Cardell. Our keynote session actually features two visionary leaders. They're from Tennessee. Don't hold that against them. They're from Tennessee, and they have proven that education and workforce development inside correctional facilities can transform lives and actually strengthen economies. We're so delighted to have them here. Representative Michael Curcio is a former member of the Tennessee House of Representatives. He championed policy that integrated correctional education into the state's workforce strategy. He is joined today by Mr. Jared Campbell, who is chair of the board for the Tennessee Higher Education, we call them THEI, a trailblazing organization that's bridging education and employability for justice involved individuals. Together they'll share Tennessee's story, the journey from policy to practice, and we will think about what Louisiana can learn as we chart our own course. Immediately following the keynote, Mr. Brace Godfrey, who Senior VP at the artist formerly known as the Baton Rouge Area Chamber, but now the Greater Baton Rouge Economic Partnership, will facilitate our Louisiana reaction panel, and then you'll get to see Senator Rick Edmonds, who I didn't forget about you, but I didn't want to upstage him. Please join me in welcoming Rep. Michael Curcio to Louisiana and Mr. Jared Campbell. Thank you, guys.
All right.
There we go. Good morning. First of all, I know we're going to sound like a broken record this morning, but Dr. Vosper is a rock star. Can we all agree on that?
Yes.
This has been a fantastic 2 days. Hello. Dinner, to get together last night, tours yesterday. This entire process has been such a shot in the arm. I know for me, as a former legislator, it seemed like we built so much momentum. COVID hit. We all know what happened after that. States took a step back in a lot of cases, but what a shot in the arm. So thank you, Dr. Vosper, for what you're doing. It's okay. I ran for office. I can talk really loud. But Jared, why don't you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of give your background a little bit?
Absolutely. Well, my name is Jared Campbell, and I'm the board chairman of the Tennessee Higher Education Initiative, which is a nonprofit organization based out of Nashville, Tennessee, that provides degree-bearing programs to folks who are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated. We have several sites across Tennessee where we partner with local community colleges and state universities to bring those degree-bearing programs. Personally, and professionally, I'm a senior software engineer for Shaw Industries, where I work on financial services applications, and I build and maintain those. So if you want to go ahead and introduce.
Sure. So again, my name is Michael Curcio. I'm originally from little town Dixon, Tennessee, which is about 40 miles west of Nashville. Grew up there, went away to college, worked like a lot of young people do on Capitol Hill right after I graduated to get some experience. And then I came home back to Tennessee, went into the insurance financial services industry. We have a firm where we serve about 2,000 group clients under management in the lower 48. And so I was a business guy, had a business background. And then after several years of that, was recruited to run for the House of Representatives. in Tennessee. And so I ran, I won, I served 3 terms, and I had the benefit of some battlefield promotions, if everybody understands that concept. But when I came in, I had happened to know the Speaker of the House. My brother had interned for her about 25 years prior to that. And so as a freshman, I was appointed vice chairman of the Judiciary Committee, which was totally unheard of. Well, to add to my luck, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee decided he wanted to run for majority leader after a year. And so there I was in this position as a freshman to take over the chairmanship of the Judiciary Committee. And so it was a kind of a fast acceleration. I know we've got some lawmakers in the room. That doesn't usually happen that way. But I think God and providence and luck put me in that position because it was also at a unique time where criminal justice reform and this focus on folks who are behind the wall really came to the forefront. And that became a passion of mine, and that's what you're going to hear a little bit about this morning. But that's my background. I left the legislature 3 years ago now. I retired. I decided it was not a career for me. It was going to be somebody else's honor after that. My wife and I have 3 young children, and I like being home for dinner. So I'm back in the private sector, still at our financial services firm, and then I also now have a lobbying, a PR, and crisis management firm that I run with some of my former staffers from Tennessee government. So.
I'm also a family man myself. I've got 2 amazing kids and a wonderful wife, and I do like to be home for dinner as well.
Yes.
So.
Maybe even tonight.
Exactly. Hopefully. We'll see if the flights take off.
So Jared, maybe we could start this off by, you've kind of introduced yourself, but I think our story, we could go back, maybe to an earlier time, but maybe for the purposes of this, maybe talk about your kind of what was happening through 2018, 2019, kind of just before you and I originally met.
Sure. So before I was the chairman of the board of Tennessee Higher Education, or THEI, I was a student in their program, Attorney Center Correctional Complex. I was in the associate's degree program for business administration. And in 2018, I was coming up on, I was about to finish my degree in prison. And, I had a lot of uncertainty right before I got out because I knew I had this education. I was grateful to get it. But I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I didn't really have the resources. I knew I was going back to the same community. I knew that I was going to face challenges despite earning a degree behind bars. 2018 rolls into 2019, and the governor announced a volunteer mentorship initiative. At the time, I didn't really understand what that was. All I knew was that the folks who were facilitating our program was going to be pairing us with members of the legislature as mentors, which I thought was an incredible opportunity. And this is where I got a chance to finally meet former Representative Curcio here.
So during that same period of time, I had just been elected to the General Assembly, again, coming from basically a business background. And I tell folks all the time, criminal justice, the judiciary, quite frankly, was not something that I ran seeking. I think I'm still off. Which is fine. Oh, there we go. It was more of an issue that found me. So just in the same way, maybe Jared and I can share. How about that? There we go. So in the same way that I received this sort of battlefield promotion, which was unexpected, I also, having come elected, realized that I was one of the few members of the General Assembly that had a prison in my district, right? They're kind of spread out in rural areas. I represented a rural district, and the Attorney Center Industrial Complex was located in Olney, Tennessee, on an old farm that actually belonged to one of my donors. A sweet lady in Centerville, Tennessee, grew up on this farm, and her parents sold it to the state back in the 70s, or late 60s even. And it's actually the oldest facility in the system traditionally it was known to be a very violent place. They'd had these very public riots. They'd had a fire there. The original structure was built of wood. It was on stilts. It was a very odd situation because it's built on this hill overlooking the Duck River. And so when they constructed this thing in the 60s, they actually built it all out of wood and built it out on stilts, as opposed to using the natural contours of the land where it works now. So during one of these infamous riots, the entire place burned to the ground. I mean, so this was a prison that we hadn't heard a lot of great stories out of, right, traditionally as Tennesseans. But the facility had come a long way. There was a new warden there. And I'll be honest, my desire to visit the place was really more about, well, I've never been to a prison, and there's a bunch of state employees there, and they've all got families that could vote for me, and so maybe I should go there and meet them, you know? So I go out one day for what I think is gonna be a grip and grin kind of, you know, barbecue lunch. I'm gonna get a few photos, and I'm gonna go back home and say, I went to prison, isn't that unique, you know? And nothing could be further from the truth. I entered the facility, I met the warden, I could tell immediately there was something special about this place. And it was called, he referred to it as Turney Center University. A great personality. If you've ever seen My Cousin Vinny, the Joe Pesci character, this is the warden in this rural community in Tennessee. I mean, like, straight out of Central Casting. And I'm like, Gino, like, how you doing in Centerville, Tennessee, buddy? You know, my father's from Manhattan, by the way, so I've seen this story before. I was like, nobody thinks you're from around here. So, but he had such a passion for this facility. He began to educate me and said, look, everybody here is gainfully employed, whether that means they're going to class or they're working in the prison somewhere, or they're, you know, literally whether it be they're cleaning up in the dining hall, or they're shining shoes, or they're taking, you know, associate's degree classes. And I thought, man, I had no idea. I just naively thought people went to prison and then some magic happened and then they came back out and everybody lives happily ever after, right? I mean, this was just not my bailiwick. And so through that tour that day, I said, there's something here. And I began coming back at least quarterly, but sometimes I was there, you know, once a month, and learned about the veterans program that they had there. I was asked to speak at a graduation that they had and a Veterans Day banquet, and I got to know the human beings that were incarcerated there. And it really began to transform my life and my viewpoint on what we owed as a state to the folks who were incarcerated at Turney Center and at other places across the state. So fast forward, Jared talked about the volunteer mentorship initiative. Again, as chairman of the committee, it was my job to bring the governor's agenda from the majority leader, but when it dealt with judiciary issues, especially criminal justice reform, it was my job to take that and sell that to the rest of the caucus and to the legislature and to help shepherd it through the House. Excuse me. So one morning, I'm commuting into Nashville. I live about 45 minutes away, and I was able to work in the car, and I was taking calls, and the governor calls, and he says, "Hey, State of the State's coming up in about a week, and I want to ask you to help me with something." Okay. He says, "I would like to launch, with your help, you and Chairman Bell from the Senate, what we're going to call the Volunteer Mentorship Initiative." And I said, "Well, tell me about it." He said, "Well, this is born out of an experience that I had in private business where our governor, Bill Lee, had gone into prison and had mentored a young man who was going through prison for multiple years. And then when he came out, he actually came and worked at the Lee Company, which is the governor's family business." He said, "So based on this experience, I want you and Chairman Bell to spearhead a statewide coalition of business owners, entrepreneurs, regular everyday folks, nurses, school teachers, anybody who wants to sign up. There's going to be a portal to go into Tennessee's prisons and mentor folks who are going through this process. But I want you to start it out, and I want the very first class of mentors to be completely comprised of legislators." Uh-oh. Because most of my colleagues were kind of like me. They'd never been to a prison. And so I thought, well, I don't know how this is going to go. But we announced it at the State of the State address. Chairman Bell and I stood up, and we went to our colleagues, and we recruited them, and we had a class. I don't remember the initial numbers, but our first visit was in fall of 20, I had to write it down. It was 2019. So Jared, what happened from your perspective when that started?
Yeah, and I want to go back to him mentioning about the state of the prison being notoriously known for violence back in the day. It was not the case when I got there, and I think the big reason why is because of the programs we had at that prison. The college program, but along with the trades programs and the factories that they had contracted with to come in and put guys to actual work, where they were making a minimum wage or above salary. So the culture of the prison had changed, and it was changing as I was there. So in 2019, the mentorship initiative was announced, and I was paired with Mr. Curcio here, from Representative Curcio. I remember it being a really dark and damp room. So they brought the legislators in and to meet us, those that they had chosen to be the first cohort to be mentored. So they paired us with our mentees, and I remember talking to Mr. Curcio here and saying, hey, I get out in about 5 or 6 months. This is all great and everything, but I really wish that we would have met a little sooner. So we started talking, and he started asking me about what my aspirations were, and how could he help me and things like that. And basically my answer was, I just need a network. I need resources that I can lean on whenever I'm released, so I can be successful and have a successful career and do the things that I know is right, live a meaningful life. So we met once, and then a few months later we met again, and this was a different kind of meeting. He brought a man named Josh Smith, who's now on the federal level, one of the directors of the Board of Regents, to come in and basically ask me, like, what's your plan? What's your 3 month? What's your 6 months? What's your 5-year plan? And I said, well, when I get out, I want to continue my education, and I'd like to go to the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. And that was a goal I had set for myself. And I was working alongside some of our program directors through THEI to send in applications. I'd done well enough in community college. I received my associate's degree a year prior, and I wanted to continue that education. And personally, I wanted to, pursue a degree in computer science, and I also took a minor in economics because I had a teacher from Nashville State who would come to the prison, and on my final exam for a macroeconomics exam, it was, if you want to pursue, she wrote a note that said, if you want to pursue a degree in economics, I think you would be fantastic at it. And it was so powerful to me to hear that, because the program was just teaching me little ways to win over time. Every semester, I was getting little wins under my belt. Before I'd come to prison, I was continually doing bad habits, constantly bad habits, and those bad habits, nobody just wakes up and they're like, oh, I think I'll commit terrible things and go to prison one day. It's over time where bad habits build up. But the thing with the college program was, I was building good habits, and over time they were building up. So I was getting a win every semester when I got an A or on a report, or when I got an A in a class and things like that. So I said, I don't really, 3, 6, 9 months, I'd like to be in school. I'd like to be pursuing my education at UTC. And so, we spoke about that, and I get out, I get released, and I apply, and I'm immediately rejected from the university. So what now? What do I do now? And then, well, I'll let you tell this next part.
So I'm keeping up with Jared as best as I can. He's released just before COVID hits. As a legislator, as a father of 3 children, as a spouse, my wife's a public school teacher, there was a lot going on with COVID-19, right? some people are masking, some people are not masking. I'm getting yelled at when I go to the Mexican restaurant to pick up tacos for my kids. You know, it's like you can't win for losing, right? Everybody's upset. So I'm trying to keep up with Jared as best as I can, but it's like we all were sort of in survival mode at this point. But we would maintain contact through phone calls, and we would check in once a month or so. I mean, it was on a regular cadence to it. Yeah, about an hour at a time. And Jared, I don't know how else to describe it. The first night I met Jared in that horrible, dark GED basement with no windows, he had this light. I mean, he was shining bright in that prison. And that light continued through his release date, and it continued through our phone calls. And then one day I'm talking to Jared, and I'm like, he's giving me family updates. I'm hearing about his mother. I'm hearing about his job that he's doing. And I said, well, Jared, this is great. We've been talking for 45 minutes, but I haven't heard anything about UT Chattanooga. And he said, well, I've changed my mind about that. You know, that was a good idea, but I think I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And I said, Jared, that just doesn't sound like you. If I may, I mean, I'm not trying to offend you, but that's not the Jared that I know. So what's up? And he didn't want to tell me, but he'd been denied. And not only had been denied once, he'd been denied twice. And I said, well, do you still want to go? And he said, well, yeah, but you don't understand. Like, my life is different than yours. I'm paraphrasing, but, you know, it was like that's, the answer is no. And so I'm not going. And that was upsetting to me. I think, I want to say this conversation took place over a phone call and then probably like multiple text messages. Like it kind of dragged out for a couple of days. What he didn't know was that during that time period, I was reconnecting with a dear friend of mine who had run for governor in the primary against Bill Lee, who I had supported. Luckily, the governor forgave me for that. A guy named Randy Boyd, who was a dear friend of mine and had since become the president of the UT system, like system-wide, all 95 counties of Tennessee. Randy Boyd and I are having lunch at the Nashville City Club, literally to catch up. I mean, let me tell you guys, I'm the worst legislator in the history of legislators. I'm just sort of like bumbling through life, right? I'm just sort of like, yeah, I'm going to have lunch with my buddy Randy, everything's fine. We're having lunch at the City Club, and I'm getting text messages from Jared, and again, this conversation's continuing. Well, at this point, I'm mad. Not at Jared. I'm mad that, like, the system's broken, right? We've been telling these guys, the governor and I have spent millions of dollars trying to reach these folks and saying, look, if you do these things, if you do what we ask you to do, you put one foot in front of the other, you get your ticket punched. When you get out of here, we're going to help you. And now we've got one department of Tennessee, the Department of Corrections, telling these guys one thing, and we've got another department inside the exact same state government telling them the complete opposite. There's well, we can't let you come to school. You've got a criminal record. Yeah, I went to prison, right? Of course I have a criminal record. And so I'm having lunch with Randy, and I look at my phone, and he says, what's up? And I said, man, I'm so frustrated. And I tell him the story just like I just told it to you, not thinking about the fact that he's the president of the UT system. And he was like, what's his name? I said, Jared Campbell. He was like, hold on. He said, I've got the president of UT Chattanooga on the phone. They're calling the admissions director. We're going to figure this out. And that launched this kind of like 3-day sort of bing, 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 back and forth kind of ping pong. But anybody who works in state systems, what you know is that the state doesn't mean to be inefficient. It just is, right? It's just this big, hulking system. And so I immediately re-engaged with THEI. We have a big, what I call a 3-pizza meeting, where I always say, if you have a meeting that's too large, that's so large you can't feed it with 3 pizzas, then there's too many people in the meeting. So I have a 3-pizza meeting with TDOC, THEI, and the UT system. And I'm like, guys, do you understand why this is so maddening? You know, and so we used Jared literally as a test case. And I said, guess what? There's several hundred more Jareds. It's not just him. And so the moral, I guess the end of the story, or at least the end of this part of the story, is that he was able to matriculate to UT Chattanooga. And why don't you tell us what you did with that opportunity?
Yeah, so I finally got into school, and I was incredibly grateful. And so the way it happened to me when I talked to you, I was like, well, what do you mean? You just had lunch with him? And he was just, yeah, well, we'll just go ahead and, okay, well, Thank you. So I started at UT Chattanooga, and I took a degree in computer science, majored in computer science with a minor in economics, and I knew I wanted to write and build applications. I'd watched this show in prison called Mr. Robot, and I'm not sure if many of you have seen this before, but it was about a guy who was a programmer, and he felt like he didn't have any power in his personal life, but when he was able to like build systems and things like that, he was able to like really make a way for himself. And so that resonated with me. And I said, you know what, I want to pursue this computer science degree. And once I started that, opportunities just started opening up for me. I eventually interned at a lab, at the HPC lab at the Sim Center in Chattanooga for the school. So there I built applications through C++ and high-performance computing machines with a library called MPI, which is Message Passing Interface. It was some really old school stuff. I was completely I had no clue what was going on for a long time. But with doing that, I was able to build some skills. So I built some programming skills. I was able to, and I also thought to myself, like, hey, I've just been in a college and prison program. And do I have the aptitude to go to a university system? I just went through associate's degree program. I take 2 or 3 classes a semester, not a heavy load. And they were general studies classes. And yeah, I did really well. But you know, I said, well, this is a different level. This is the university system. Can I really do it and then hold myself accountable? But what I didn't realize is that I'd already been holding myself accountable. I'd already been giving myself the skills. But every semester, I just did my work. A lot of folks will tell you they don't remember anything about their undergrad. And the truth is, I really don't myself either, except for the really important things. But I do remember that what college taught me is that you learn how to commit to something, and you have the discipline to learn how to learn. And that's what I was learning at THEI. I was learning how to learn. So I'm matriculated through that program. 2023, I graduated. In 2021, I started the internship, and then the summer of 2022, I took another sort of college job where I guided the Ocoee River, which was something that I thought would be really fun to do and expand myself socially, you know. But yeah, so I graduated in the fall of 2023, and actually Mr. Curcio was there to,
As well as President Boyd.
And President Boyd. So it was a really full circle moment. So yeah, I graduated, and now I'm on the job hunt. So I applied at several places, and I ended up with 2 offers. I interviewed at FedEx, and I interviewed at Shaw Industries. FedEx offered me a data science internship, and Shaw Industries offered me a software engineering internship. Unfortunately, the FedEx internship didn't work out after I got the offer. It was pulled because of the background check. So they rescinded that offer, but luckily down the road, I'd got the offer from Shaw Industries, and where I interned, and then I came on full-time as a software engineer, and I was recently promoted a few months ago to a senior software engineer. So.
Yeah, phenomenal story, right? And there are hundreds of those sitting in Louisiana, in Tennessee, and in all 50 states across the nation. I'll try to sort of land this plane for us a little bit. Some key takeaways that I took from this. First of all, the work continued in the General Assembly after that. We passed the Reentry Success Act in 2021. I spearheaded legislation for liability protections for employers. I don't know if that's something that Louisiana has done or not, but where, you know, basically we removed that fear from employers that if you hire somebody, you know, it is not a liability on you that they have a record. Now, if they commit a new a new offense while they're working for you and they endanger some, that's a different story. But just by virtue of the fact that they work there, you're not endangering your other employees and that sort of thing. And we've shielded them from that liability. Your trial bar will not like that, by the way, but we thought it was a good piece of legislation. We did some certificates of livability, some certificates of education. We're working, kind of continuing down that liability shield even to today. So one of the bills that THEI has asked us to bring this year is a certificate of education, basically removing any liability for an institute of higher education that wants to bring on a learner who has been incarcerated or justice involved previously. One of the things that I heard yesterday that I've heard over and over again, I heard from Jared, I heard from a young man that I was having lunch with yesterday, and Jared wanted to make sure that I mentioned this, was the power of education. One of the things, when Jared was still incarcerated, I said, when you leave here, we're going to go to the governor's office on the first floor of the Capitol, and he's going to meet you, and you're going to have a chance to talk with him. And Jared said, that doesn't sound possible. And I said, well, get ready. So we went and did that, and our governor, we sat there in the governor's conference room right out of his office. You remember this? And the governor, well-meaning, he had 40,000 other meetings that day, and so he came as prepared as one does, and he started asking, well, tell me about your programming while you're in prison. Tell me about your anger management classes. Tell me about substance abuse classes. Tell me about all these things. And my recollection of it, and Jared may have a different, but Jared was very politely answering the governor's questions, but he sort of had this look of hesitancy on his face, and he looked at me, and I said, look, this is your meeting. Tell him what you need him to know. And he said, Governor, respectfully, I went to those classes that you asked me about because I had to go to them. What changed me was an education. You're going to change people's brains. They're going to fundamentally be a different person after they get an education. And yesterday, a young man sitting next to us, do you remember what he said? He said, He said, now that I have the benefit of my education, he said, it wasn't until I had the benefit of my education that I realized the shame of my situation. He said, when I got here, I honestly didn't know I had done wrong, or I didn't feel remorse or shame for that. He said, now I can reflect on my life in completely different ways because I am a different person than I was when I came in this facility. Not an improved person, not a slightly, fundamentally a different human being because I now have an education. I think that is what is so critical about this. The last piece of this, and I know we've got to move on, is I think if this story has taught me anything, and as we met with gentlemen yesterday at Rayburn, is that this reentry is hard. And these folks are going to hit a brick wall. I don't think it's a question of whether or not they're going to hit a brick wall. And it is incumbent upon the folks in this room, mentors, if you don't have an active mentorship program in Louisiana, start one. If you've got one and it's kind of dormant, energize it. We need folks from all counties, all parishes to say, yeah, I run a bank, or I'm a nurse, or I'm a physician, or a school teacher, but I'm going to give up X number of hours a month and go into that prison and meet with somebody and teach them something that their mother or their father couldn't teach them or didn't teach them. And when they come out of prison then, it's going to be required of you to reach into your personal Rolodex and help them get a job and make those connections. No one else is going to do that for them. If I had approached this from a very sort of hands-off, this looks great on TV kind of approach, Jared would have called me and said, I'm having trouble. And I said, well, it sounds like the job you got at the box factory is pretty good, Jared. But that wasn't my job as his mentor. My job as his mentor was to put my personal reputation on the line because he earned it and get him introduced to the folks that could change his life forever. And I have no pride in that. He did it, not me, right? I could have set up that meeting for him, and he could have not been a changed, transformed person, and that meeting would have gone a completely different direction. So I take no credit for that. He did the work, not me. But it's going to be incumbent upon the folks in your network and these folks who come into these prisons to say, this is a real personal commitment. It's the only way it's going to work. So I hope this was helpful. Anything you want to add?
Well, I will say this, going into the Rayburn yesterday, I saw myself in a lot of the men there. And they were at the exact same point I was before I got out. They had reshaped their identities, but they were looking towards the future, and it was uncertain for them. And I just tried to keep reminding these men, hey, you're already winning. You have already, every step that you take towards bettering yourself and furthering your education will open doors for you when you get out. Like you said earlier, we will face roadblocks. It's inevitable. However, we've been building the resilience each semester at a time. So, before we end, I wanted to thank Untapped Talent and Dr. Vosper too for having us out here to speak to you folks today. So, thank you.
All right, as we transition, I think we can do a little bit better than that for our first panelists. Give them one more round of applause, please. What we are not gonna do is sit around and be admirers of problems. God bless. If that's not the quote of the day, I don't know what is. I forgot to point, Dr. Vosper. Look, we have 27 minutes, and that is a lot to unpack, so I will do very, very quick introductions. We will dive in. Not that any one of these three people needs an introduction in this room, but from the Louisiana Board of Regents, Commissioner Dr. Kim Hunter Reed, from the Louisiana 6th Senate District, Senator Rick Edmonds. And from the State Chamber of Commerce, Louisiana Association of Business and Industry, Government Relations Director, Mary Beth Derrickson. So let's just dive right in, right? Commissioner, we'll start with you. Each of you can take a piece of this question. We heard some lessons, and at the very end, got some kind of just bottom line takeaways. What did you hear that you're thinking, we need to do this right now?
Well, so much that I heard. Thank you both for sharing. And I want to, can I just quickly say to Jared, how important it was for you to share your story yesterday at Rayburn, because what I heard from so many people was, I have a plan, but I don't have hope. But when you have someone stand up who says, I was here, and now I have a family and a great job, and I'm an advocate, and you can do it too, that gives you hope plus the plan, right? So that is amazing. And to Michael, of course, really actionable and amazing. So for me, what I heard and what I continue to hear when I visit prison education programs is, we have good education programs, we need the employment, right? We need the employment. So the conversation about whose responsibility is it to try to connect quality educational experiences to employment, I think that is the secret sauce we have to have.
Well, all we can do is echo what we heard in the room today. You two gentlemen have lit up the room. You said that he was a light, but both of you are lights, and we're grateful for that light for both of you serving in Tennessee, and I hope that some of us can do as well in Louisiana. Once again, I know how appreciative we are of great testimonies. Testimonies change our life no matter what we're in. Business, church, school, no matter where we go. Testimony, personal testimony changes your life. And I think if there's anything that I took from that, when you said he had a light on him, I'm the opposite end as a legislator. I've been a pastor all my adult life, and I've been in a lot of prisons. And there are so many people that are in the hopeless state, And not to suggest that corrections aren't needed or not suggest that people don't have to face their penalties. I don't feel like that at all. However, I serve a God that's a God of a second and third and fourth chance. I'm glad that I do, because I would be in trouble without it. And I am grateful for what I have visited. Even we have some ground level work done at Angola of where we have some great inspirational stories. And as we go through, I have some other things I want to say about it. But I think that if you don't change the heart of a man or a woman, along with all the other opportunities, it's a twofold look into a person's life. We used to use the word rehabilitation, and again, I know we mean well, but just giving somebody or enhancing a skill, in my opinion, is not enough. There has to be both hope and preparation that are the combination. And the reason I understand it that way is because I was raised that way. I not only learned how to spell because my mother made me spell, but I understood from them, from their leadership, that I could experience anything if I applied myself. And with those two combinations, life changes. We are able then to intersect the roadblocks, which I'm glad you said you did hit some roadblocks. And so I think what we're looking to do to expand and find a way, Dr. Reed, is to find a way that we in Louisiana can bring the light. Fortunately, he had the light. So many of our folks do not have the light. You can look in their eyes and see there's nothing there. They're empty. And we've got to fill that empty space both educationally and in whichever category. If you want to call it spirituality, you pick your category. I'm not here to preach to you today. I'd be glad to. There's a platform. But I want to warn you, if I do that, I'll take up an offering before we leave.
Well, first of all, I just want to say it's quite an honor to be sitting up here with these two champions. So I appreciate you guys having me. I think my biggest takeaway, so Lobby, we serve over 2,000 employers from across the state, businesses large and small, everyone from Ochsner to Joe's Tire Shack in Baton Rouge. And I think my biggest takeaway was something that you, Michael, said about we've got to remove barriers for employers to hire these folks. We proudly represent several second chance hirers, and I'm looking at Carrie in the back from the Parole Project, who they're doing incredible work pairing these folks with employment. But Jerry Lane, Turner Industries, several of those companies, but we need more. We need the entire business community bought in, and I think that's where my organization and others come in. But my biggest takeaway, I was kind of writing furiously when you were talking about all the legislation that you guys worked on, particularly removing liability for employers, and that's a huge barrier. And when we talk to our members, there's a stigma around second chance hiring. So it's removing that stigma, but it's also removing barriers to employment. So those are my biggest takeaways, I think.
Thank you for that. Senator, you are chair of the Senate Education Committee, and we've, of course, got Representative Freiberg here who sits on the House Education Committee as well. 2026, we go into legislative session. Based on what you've heard, based on what you've worked on in the past, how do you see us from a legislative perspective making moves forward in this space?
All right. So I've been thinking about this before I got here. Not even last night. I was just thinking because I knew where you were going, I thought. And, as I think about it, I got to sidebar this a little bit. Last year, Dr. Reed and I met in relationship to the loss of college graduates in the state of Louisiana. She brought a statistic to me and said, well, we're losing 40%. When they walk across a platform, name your university, pick the institution. 40% gone. And I think of the millions of dollars we're investing in the life of our children, and then at the end of that, I don't want to say no return because, I'm glad they got a degree. But in Louisiana, something we don't want to hear. We'd love that number to go down. So we're working on that just to make certain that we create a pathway from the get-go. I heard the new chancellor of LSU say that this very week as he's coming in to be a provost. And we're right on target on that. And I asked Dr. Reed earlier, I said, how are our university presidents going to respond? And she said, they will respond. So in thinking about that, I think one of the avenues that we're missing on is that we need to target this environment and create the pathways. Maybe we've not done as good a job, and I'm sure we have not done as good a job of saying, okay, here's the job, here's the workforce. Here's what's happening in Louisiana. And if that's in oil and gas or wherever it is, Susie is doing a phenomenal job in workforce development. If we say to these inmates as they're preparing, Here is the job market, and we want to but we can't make anyone do anything in or out, no matter where they are. But I think what I'm interested in is the type of legislation that will now put together the Department of Corrections. I'm spitballing here. Department of Corrections, Board of Regents, workforce, at least these three or four, and we come up with these types of solution-oriented results for our inmates to give them both some help and some preparation. I'm certain this is going to be a piece of legislation that we're going to have to look at how we're going to put this and impact it in. But I think if we could take the data and find out where people are, recognize, and I don't think we've done this, I think if we could look at all of our population in all of our institutions and say, this is what we've got, this is the amount of time they have left on serving out their sentencing, and then we deliberately target what we have to offer as a state and begin the preparation path for jobs that they could get so that they don't get out and their continuing preparation, and then they can't really even get a job that we prepared them for. I think that would be critical, I think, and it really has, I'm inspired about it. I think it would be something, we haven't chatted, but I'm coming. All right.
Love it, love it. One thing that we've heard, if you'll pass the mic to Dr. Reed, one thing we've heard a lot about in the last couple of years is taking a whole of government approach to solving problems. And that, Senator, is what I kind of hear you saying right now. Let's bring together the agency heads and figure this thing out. And so, Dr. Reed, I'd like for you to riff on that a little bit. The second part of the question, though, is how well does the state of Louisiana provide educational opportunities inside of facilities, and what could we be doing better in that space?
So I was looking at the bottom of this banner that talked about opportunities for all, and I do think that systemically we have to think about what are the educational offerings that we're providing, and do they match the labor markets that we need, right? That's the exact work we're doing right now with career alignment with our college students. The other thing that I heard and that the Senator and Rep. Freiberg and I have talked about is work-based learning, right? The internship, the apprenticeship, the hands-on experience. And what I heard our Tennessee folks speak about was, didn't you say that the central casting guy said, everyone here is doing meaningful work? So I have a question in my mind about what does meaningful work look like behind the wall right now? Is everyone who's in an automotive program working on fleet? Is everyone in a culinary program working on culinary? Is everyone who's interested in supply chain working on how logistics works in a facility? So that's a question that I have. If we're going to say work-based learning, apprenticeship, internship is part of the educational reality for Louisiana students, then it needs to be part of the reality for all Louisiana students. So that's how I'm thinking about this. That's a question that I have, not a deficit model to say they're doing something wrong, but how do we put it on steroids? Because that's what I heard you say. Every person in this facility is doing meaningful work. So that's what I want to see.
Love that, love that. Mary Beth, let's come over to you. So you mentioned that your association represents about 2,000 businesses statewide, and we also understand the disconnect. Statistics, at least in the capital region we were looking at not long ago, showed that there are probably almost 2 available jobs for every 1 job seeker, and so the opportunities are there. We're just not doing a very good job filling those jobs. How do we do that? How do we get there? And how do you in your position and your organization pull the employer community into the offering of these opportunities to quote-unquote non-traditional job seekers?
That's a great question. I did want to make a quick comment on something that Senator Edmonds said. If it was up to me, we would have every legislator touring LCIW in Rayburn like we did yesterday. And I just want to thank Stephanie for all of her work and the LCIW team. It's been incredibly inspiring to see what is going on inside. And to your question, Trey, I think that part of the equation that we might be missing is we spoke to several ladies yesterday that had 3, 4, 5 credentials. They're doing everything that they can to be prepared to get on the outside, but having credentials isn't the end all be all, in the sense of we have to make sure these folks have a safe place to stay. They don't go into the environments that they came into prison from. It's going to have to be a holistic approach, and I think when we talk about legislation, stay tuned, because I think that we have a lot of ideas coming from this, but I do think that's a piece that we can't forget, that we can educate these folks, they can be credentialed, but we have to, get them gainful employment. That is the key to never going back to prison. But also we have to think about logistics in the day-to-day. We have to give them a soft place to land, which I do think the Parole Project has figured that out in the Capital Region. But I think a huge part of the business community getting involved is seeing how other businesses model this, because we do have successful second chance hirers, and I will say, if you know Stevie Toops in this room, you know that he is waving this flag. So I think it's getting folks like that in front of other businesses that might be, a little hesitant or something like that. And I think that's where lobby can come in as well in advocating for second chance hiring. So I do think removing barriers is a huge, huge problem. But I think we need, Senator Edmund preaching the gospel of second chance hiring, maybe take him on the road. So
Let me add to that. I think as I listen, I hope that we're all listening, and I think we can't eliminate all the fears overnight, and no matter how much some of us have certain passions, there are legitimate fears that involve things, that unanswered questions, and we have to deal with that. That roadblock has to be dealt with. We can't do it with anger, and we can't do it with, well, that person's just a bad closed mind. We can't take those approaches. So maybe what we need to admit today is, as a legislator, I need help. We need to have this summit for legislators, with the governor with us in the room. I mean, if you want us to really make a difference, I'll do what I can, and we'll have some level of success, as our former Tennessean from his house had some success, but he didn't do it. He told you he didn't do it by himself. He wasn't in a vacuum, and he didn't just get lucky. He had a relationship, and relationships mean a lot. I know I'm taking too much time on this, but I think it's very important that we catch this, that there's two rooms that we need to make an impact in. One room is with legislators and with leadership, whether that's Susie and the governor and the legislators, and we do something, and we bring ourselves up to an understanding. And I think the second is because I'm in your room. I've been a lobby guy for 10 years with you guys. And I think the other is with our business community, that we're in the room together, we figure out what some of the issues are, legitimate issues that business owners and leaders have, and maybe that's some of the groundwork we have to do to get us to the next step.
Very well. Commissioner Reed, we heard very briefly some pieces of legislation that in 2021, our rep brought in the state of Tennessee, and I was writing as furiously as I could, the Reentry Success Act, which I look forward to doing a little more research on all of these, liability protections for employers, certificates of liability, certificates of education. One of the things that also came up when Mr. Campbell was talking about FedEx, there was a background check, and that thing became a barrier. And so there's ideas like employer vouched expungements even. As we begin to move into 2026, considering legislation and those potential solutions, what else comes to mind from your end about what we could do to bring more solutions in this space?
So the first thing I think that comes to mind was the testimony, as my good senator said, the testimony that changes minds and hearts. And what I heard was education was the thing that really changed my thinking, not the mandatory mental health program, not the mandatory substance abuse program, but the fact that I'm now an educated citizen changed my mindset and how I think. And in a world where people want to know that we are safe and that we're using the highest and best use of our dollars on investment, the question of what is the right intervention to change minds and hearts is an important one, right? You're trying to balance resources. So I think about that, and I think about what does that mean for everyone, the 1,200 that Lisa mentioned, right? So there are states right now that require mandatory education in order for you to finish your sentence. So I have a question about that. What are the requirements in our facilities? What does the law say about education? The second piece, obviously, is around employment, because what I think I heard and what I think is in the Tennessee story is that there are people who are gainfully employed with an escrow account. They have real jobs, not just facility jobs, real jobs, and an escrow account, so their full salary is going into an account, and when they leave, they have access to that account. What does that look like legislatively for us as well? So we have real education to employment pipelines for individuals. So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about.
Thank you. Senator, legislators as mentors. Can we sign you up?
Sure. No reservation. I love it. I think it's great.
It's definitely worth a hand clap. Is that something that you could foresee getting behind and pulling some of your colleagues into?
I would think that, again, if you're asking me, I'm trying to think on my feet. I think that would be a great second step, but I do think this in the room together is the first step to begin that motivation. I'm not suggesting we wouldn't have some legislators that might be interested or they've made the trips. They've gone to Angola and they've seen what my graduate school, New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, has done a phenomenal job at Angola. And what they've done is they've gone in and put a campus there, and I've been there with the students, watched them test and met with them. It's amazing to watch point A to point B of what they're getting educationally and what they're getting spiritually. It's both a combo. Obviously, that's where I live, so you expect that's what you're going to hear from me. But I think that is critical. The education part is critical to bring a revival to that person's life, a changed person, you said. I didn't say it, you said it. It's a changed person. It's not just an equipped person. You can give a lot of equipping to people that don't go to prison and that still don't do well. It has nothing to do with that. It's a changed person. And this is deep dive. So I love the deep dive. I want to say one other thing, what she said that I think is very important for legislation to move forward. One of the things, I think that we don't have enough data that tells us what the condition of our inmates are. Where are they in their life walk? I think this is critical. We have it in high school. We got kids. We know where they are. We dual enroll them. You know, we help create a pathway. But if we're going to be serious about this, we're going to have to really have some data help from corrections, put together the workforce, and that's going to be something I'm going to look at as soon as Dr. Reed tells me what to do.
So, well, I'm gonna have a little fun here. Let's revisit some actual legislation, and this will be for the two of you. This work is great, and it's also got to be funded. And so there's legislation from last session and a session before that even some of our funding mechanisms have barriers tied to them. One of our great workforce development funding mechanisms, the M.J. Foster Promise Scholarship Program, is closed to people who've been convicted of certain crimes. And so we've worked to kind of peel those things back. But one of the issues we run into is programs like that are not adequately funded to be able to expand the population of people who can take advantage of that. How do we deal with that as a very real pragmatic issue, dealing with our budget and how much it costs to actually roll out successful programs? I'll start with you, Senator.
Just abusing me is what you're doing. All right, so he's right. So we raised the cap. If y'all know what Murphy J. Foster is, a phenomenal program in Louisiana, doing great. But we're only at about $10 million a year. I raised the cap to $40 million a year. We attempted to get more funding, and we were unsuccessful to get it there. On the flip of that is that because it's so narrow at $10 million, we're going to use every dollar we got, and it's all working. The argument is made is, well, we got all these folks that are not in prison, and we can't fund them. And so I think the better approach is, I think, funding on both sides. And I don't know how we do this yet, but maybe Murphy J. Foster's not the right answer. maybe Murphy J. Foster for reentry or something. I think that's the better approach to eliminate the argument and then fund them both. And I think we in Louisiana, we know what a credential bind we're in. We're at 25 to 55. We're overwhelmingly out of balance with adults that don't have any credential. This is not folks in prison. This is everybody. I mean, this is a dilemma that we're in. And so credentialing people from 25 to 55 has got to be as important as anything we do. Early childhood and 25 to 55 is critical, and many of these inmates are going to fall in that category. So I think we're on the right track. Dr. Reed will tell us how we're going to fix it.
Just real quick, our moderator is very modest. He has done a lot of work on this front, and we really appreciate all of that you do at the partnership. I think when we talk about cost to the state, and this is not specific to MJ Foster, just in general, I think it's important, and I think, we've kind of found success talking to legislators, breaking down the numbers of having someone incarcerated, what that costs the state, which I think is upwards of about $20,000 a year. And we're also, obviously, I don't have to tell this room, but we're the most incarcerated population in the country, versus investing in their education to make sure they don't go back to prison. And so I think that there should be every option on the table when it comes to figuring out how we give education opportunities to folks. Obviously, MJ Foster is a very popular program, and that is not going to be the end-all, be-all. But when we message, that to our legislators, it's important to remember how much it costs to have folks incarcerated. So I just want to make that.
I'll just add one other point as I'm thinking about the federal environment right now, and I know Senator Edmonds is going to ask us about stacking funding, right? So Workforce Pell is about to become a reality. We'll have to look to see, does it include an opportunity for formerly incarcerated? We think also about Second Chance Pell, which is also coming, so that individuals who are incarcerated have opportunity to access Pell Grants, stacked with MJ Foster, stacked with support, wraparound services. So I think it is on us to sort of think about what are all the funding streams that could make a difference, and then what are all of the business and community partnerships that can make a difference as well. And so it's not an isolated funding question, it's a collaborative funding question, and we are big tent people in Louisiana. Dr. Vosper says we're serial collaborators. She is a serial collaborator, so I think we have to think about that holistically as we do this work.
Got it. Very good. Look, we are almost at time. Mary Beth, we'll start with you for closing remarks, and I'll give you one of two prompts to choose from. One quick wrap-up, high-level takeaway that you're going to take from this, or in 2026, what one big, impactful initiative do you think that we can take out of this work? 30 seconds.
Ooh, okay, what was the first one, really quick?
Biggest takeaway from today.
So I think over this entire 2-day summit, I think my biggest takeaway is that we can learn from other states. I had a great conversation with Dr. Sanchez back there from Maine on what they're doing to bring business and industry into their prison. They had Apple come in, and you have inmates designing apps and learning how to code and stuff like that. And while that may seem unattainable for a state like Louisiana, we can also learn from other states and our southern neighbors in Tennessee. And so this has been such a great meeting of the minds, and I think you've given us a lot to think about, and so we're really excited about 2026 and beyond.
I hope to be able to combine, as we have done, as I mentioned earlier, and I hope that we can take the workforce development folks, we can take the Board of Regents, we can take the Department of Education, and we can take the Department of Corrections and the Governor's Office, those 5 entities put together and begin on these issues that we're dealing with, get some legislation in the pipeline this year that begins to move forward some of the initiatives that we'll gain from this and from other things. But I think we can do that. I think that collaborative effort is something that we have going really well for us, that we haven't had in Louisiana. It's a big deal. When I go to other states and serve, they ask, how are you guys moving up the education ladder? And I tell them about people like Susie, that she's on board. I tell them about Dr. Kim Reed. We don't do this without, I didn't make this up. Everything rises and falls on leadership. We don't do it without these kind of leaders. It's impossible. So salute to our leaders, and I hope that you'll encourage them along the way. They're great leaders.
Dr. Reed, bring us home.
When you do hard work, you got to bring your hype guy to the job with you. That's all I'm going to say about that great Senator Edmonds. So for me, the proud moment, obviously, was hearing the testimony that said, the education is what changed my life. So that's important. But I have a quote from Craig, who we met yesterday, and he said, my story is only really relevant as part of your story and our story. And that is the connectivity and the humanity of all that we do together. And so for me, I'm energized by this work because I recognize that we are in it together and stronger together and better together. And so our communities will benefit when we solve these solutions together.
I love that. Mary Beth Derrickson, Senator Rick Edmonds, Dr. Kim Hunter Reed. I'm Trey Godfrey. Thank y'all.
Ooh-wee. I don't know who put this panel together, but you did a good job. Y'all were amazing. Here you go. Thank you. I am going to pass you your certificates, and I actually did a certificate for Commissioner Reed. I did certificates for all of our speakers because I wanted to constantly be a reminder that we have important work to do.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending the Untapped Talent Summit 2.0. Please scan the QR code on the screen or page 9 of your Untapped program booklet to sign up for 2026 work group and to complete the summit evaluation. We look forward to connecting with you in 2026. We will be ready to work.